Hello, welcome again to FairTax Power Radio. I'm Bob Paxton.
And I'm Ron Mulero.
And we are
the FairTax Guys.
Pleased for a second week in a row to be sitting here with Steve Hayes, President of Americans for Fair Taxation. I'll shake your hand again. Thank you for being with us.
Thanks for being
Ron,
here.
delighted to be here.
And let me remind everybody real quickly of our email address, thefairtaxguys@gmail.com, and our Facebook page as well. And we didn't mention, Ron, last time we were on Excluded TV.
Oh, that's right.
If you're watching on Facebook, share the video if you will. But if you're having trouble finding the FairTax Power Radio, and of course the big social media sites are excluding a lot of content that they don't like and they don't agree with. So that was the genesis of excluded.tv, and we are pleased to be associated with them. Check that out. It's a subscription, only $30 a year for FairTax Power Radio, plus some other really good shows on there. So we would urge you to do that.
No commercials.
Oh, absolutely.
Completely commercial free.
No commercials whatsoever.
Yep.
But again, we're pleased to have Steve Hayes, President of Americans for Fair Taxation, with us. And he came up with a really good thing a minute ago. We're going to talk about fake reforms to the tax code. Now, you're looking at Congress.gov. What's the count up to?
Yeah, if you've been watching FairTax Power Radio, you know we usually do a legislative update in which we take a look at Congress.gov, and in the search bar you put in quotes, Internal Revenue Code, and it'll search for all the bills that have been submitted that contain the language Internal Revenue Code. The latest one is H.R. 6689, Ensuring Lasting Smiles Act. They want to make this part of the income tax law.
If you want to ensure lasting smiles, you get rid of the income tax and replace it with a fair tax. We can do that.
Now, the interesting thing here, and we're going to ask Steve to jump in here, it still is the Internal Revenue Code of 1986. Now, we were told that last December that was the greatest tax reform in like 30-something years.
Right.
And yet, it's not the Internal Revenue Code of 2017. It's still the Internal Revenue Code of 1986. What's going on here?
Yeah. Well, what's going on is that most of the changes were simply tinkering with things that were already existing. For example, and I think it's a good example, and it's also a good one for us, is that by increasing the standard deduction for a married couple to $24,000, I always look at who the opponents of any reform are. Well, the opponents were the realtors, because they felt that the vast number of Americans are not buying million-dollar homes. They're making $50,000 to $80,000 a year. They're buying a home where the mortgage payments are $800 to $1,200, $1,400 a month. The interest on those homes may be, 80 or 90% of that payment. So what happened then is that they were afraid that a lot of the people, given a choice of getting to keep the same amount of money, would elect to rent and not to own, because there was no incentive for most of those people to buy a home. Now, these are
the mortgage interest deduction.
Yeah.
That is a sacred cow in the real estate industry.
A sacred cow that they say, and I've been on panels with real estate, the president of the Florida Real Estate Commission, Association, that's right. She was there, and the reason she was giving for why she felt that the fair tax really wasn't going to be good is that if you eliminate the mortgage deduction, you're going to bring the price of homes down between 10 and 15%. And she said, that's an immense amount of money, because the home is oftentimes the largest asset that a family has. Okay, well, it's fine. But when I came on, I said, well, if you inversely look at that, what you're saying is that all the homes in America have been increased in price by between 10 and 15%. And I looked at her, and she kind of nodded her head. I think she knew where this was going. And I said, and at this point, this was a couple of years ago, about a third of Americans itemize. So only a third of Americans are going to be able to take advantage of that.
Yeah.
And about 22% of that about 22% of the 33% are people that save somewhere between $500 and $1,000 a year because of the home mortgage deduction, because they would have gotten $12,000 anyway of deduction. Mm-hmm. And so what you're doing is, for those people who have to finance, in most cases, you're increasing the price that they have to pay by 10 to 15%, so that you can subsidize wealthy people who primarily are using it so that they can buy not $1 million home, but $1.5 million.
Yeah.
And of course, she didn't like that at all. But I then asked her, what is the most important factor in looking at the sale of a home? And she looked at me, and I said, isn't it, because of most people not having cash, the ability to qualify for a mortgage? And she said, yes, that is. And I said, if you're going to qualify for a mortgage, isn't it going to be better if you can show that you got to keep all of your income? Nods her head.
You just sprung the steel trap on her, and she's like, oh, mercy.
She's thinking, when did I lose control of this situation?
Well, afterwards, she came up to me and she goes, I think maybe I need to rethink this, because maybe it would be good.
And that's what we ask people to do.
Yeah.
Do their homework.
Yeah.
Do your homework and find out about this.
Yeah, because in effect, several members of Congress sort of wink to me that said, what we've done is actually move forward the ability for people to accept the FairTax, because we have taken this large number of people away from depending on the income tax code. Mm-hmm. And that's really what happened. And you look at who else opposed it. The Catholic bishops opposed the increased deduction.
Because of charities.
Because they were concerned that it would limit people's incentive to put money in, so they would be able to get more of a standard deduction. Yeah.
Again, it's the same argument. Most people don't itemize.
That's exactly right. And today, it's likely to be anywhere from 8 to 12% itemizing.
Oh, wow.
And everybody else is filing a standard return. So you're taking a huge group of people away from dependence on the income tax code to allow them to keep more of their money. Because that's all it is.
I know with the house issue, this is a sample of one. My wife and I wanted to buy a house as soon as we could. We just didn't want to rent anymore, because we figured, we're renting and we're living here, but there's no investment. We bought a house as soon as we could. It had nothing to do with the income tax. We wanted a house of our own.
Yes. And that's the right reason to buy a house.
Yeah.
It's not because, hey, look, the government's taking $12,000 and I'm going to get 3 of it back. Okay, that's not a good reason. The reason's because you want it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Exactly.
Because you choose to do it, and if you had all of your income, you would be able to qualify more easily for a loan, unless Ron, you and Elaine just went out and paid cash, which I suspect in your younger years, that wasn't what you did.
That's not an option for somebody that's driving a truck.
Yeah.
And this is going to date me, because our first house only cost $12,000. All right.
Oh, mercy.
Obviously, that was a long time ago in a different part of the country.
Well, but the same principle applies no matter whether it's $12,000 or $100,000 or $500,000. You still have a situation where they didn't reform, meaning, what does reform mean? That means to make something repaired from what it was before.
To fundamentally change the way it works.
Yeah. In other words, take something, and most people think of reform as take something that was bad and make it better.
Yeah.
All right? They took something that was bad and in many respects made it worse.
Oh, yeah.
Okay?
That's right.
Now, they gave some little crumbs, as Nancy Pelosi said, to all of the deplorables, the people who aren't living in her district.
And they want those crumbs back, by the way.
Because they allowed us to get a higher standard deduction, and that literally took away a lot of Congress's control. Because, again, why do they do these things? They do them in large part because if they make a change or threaten to make a change in the income tax code, The realtors pay lots of money to people to come and lobby members. The lobbyists buy lots of tickets to fundraisers for the members.
Yeah.
Okay? And they get rich.
Yeah.
And in this particular bill that just was passed, the lobbyists made more money than they've ever made in the last 2 quarters of the year because all of the special interest were trying to make sure that their tax, quote, benefit, their
little carve out
was protected. And so, and they made sure that a lot of that money got spread around to members of Congress in their campaign funds.
So what we need is a FairTax lobby that has that kind of clout.
Well, and we're not going to have that, Bob, because we're not going to get a lobbyist and a member of Congress to put themselves out of business. What we're going to need is everybody listening to the show and your neighbors and all getting educated on the idea and demanding that it change, because I've gone to Congress, literally, I've been up there for 30 years. As a volunteer, I was one of the few lobbyists that always put zeros on their return because I never got paid. In fact, I was paying my own expenses for the most part. And so I would go up there, and I got so tired of most of these guys coming up to me and putting their arm on my shoulder and patting me and saying, gosh, you're doing a great job, and I really appreciate what you're doing, and then turn around and support something that's totally not moving toward this bill, but moving away, because, again, the system is set up. Now, I had a fellow who I got to know who was friends with one of the top people in Congress. And he said that when this individual was elected, he had dinner with him and his family, and he explained that what he was going to do is he was going to go and he was going to make restrictions on people being able to leave staff and leave Congress and go to a lobbying firm for 5 years. Because he felt that was one of the biggest problems that we had, and he was going to do that. He was also going to expose some of the, let's just say, less than savory ways some of the members spend their money in different things. He got there and he made it known in one of the early caucus meetings. And when the office assignments came out, he was in the far end of the basement and whereas others who were elected in the same time, who were more congenial with the way things were done,
play ball.
They had nicer offices, and then, and he still hadn't shut up now. He still felt like he was right, so he kept promoting it. And so he was told by another member who said, this is just a friendly chat, but, in order for you to be reelected, you're going to need to raise money. And we have a congressional fund that will help contribute to the ones that we believe should be reelected. And if we don't believe they should be reelected, we will support their opponent. And wink, wink,
And we've seen that happen.
And so after a fairly short time, he got converted and became part of the swamp.
That's how the swamp operates.
Because that's how they operate.
Yes.
And it's like when you go to Congress, your spouse suddenly becomes very, very, very valuable as an employee of another company.
Yeah.
Like
yeah.
Like we had a fellow that we all know, Audrey Pruitt, who was on our national board, who was finally encouraged to run for Congress. He kept saying, look, I can't afford it because it's it's good salary, but I'm making more money and my family's used to making more money. And he got taken aside by, again, one of these people that knew how it worked and said, well, let me tell you what's going to happen. If you get elected, your wife is going to suddenly be making not the $60,000 she's making working now, but somewhere around 300, 350. And
she becomes a much more valuable
she's very
commodity,
valuable.
yes.
She's got lots of qualities that have not been recognized.
Yeah.
And so that's going to happen. Plus, you're going to get to invest in this particular fund, which is having, 6 or 8 points better performance than normal funds. And you're going to get this, and you're going to get this, and after, if you serve 3 terms, you're going to have enough of a pension that's going to be a nice cushion. All of these things go in. This is how the swamp controls. And the members of the staffs go to work there primarily because they want, not always, but primarily because they want to be able to leave and get a job in the swamp as a lobbying at 3 or 4 or 5 times or 10 times the earnings they had.
Yeah.
So when we talk about a FairTax lobby, just think of what would happen, Bob, if we had a FairTax where all of these guys who had been lobbying the tax code and who delighted in making it so much more complex, so they would be the people like the old priest. They were the only ones that could talk to God.
Yeah.
Well, these guys are the only ones that understand it because they wrote it, supposedly, even though most of them don't understand it.
I guarantee nobody understands the whole thing.
So, what would these guys do? I mean, they're going to have to get a real job?
Oh my God.
This is anathema
Heaven
to these
forbid.
guys. So you've got, the only way to do it is to hit them where they cannot be overcome with money, and that's at the ballot box.
And that's why the election here for governor, the primary in Florida, was so satisfying to
important.
me. The guy that was demagoguing the FairTax got blown away.
He got blown away, 20 points.
Yeah.
And it probably would have been more if it had gone longer because DeSantis was building up more. He got lots of negative press and negative exposure because he made up all, he claims it was his PAC that did it. But anyway, the group made up all these lies.
I want to make the point, too, that what we're talking about here is not just a Florida thing, all right? Anywhere in the country, if you have a congressman, a senator, or whatever, who's a co-sponsor or a supporter of the FairTax, and his or her opponent is trying to demagogue their support of the FairTax, 2 things have to happen. First, the candidate has to strongly defend their position. That means they have to be somewhat knowledgeable about the FairTax. They can't be an expert. But secondly, the volunteers and supporters in his or her state have to come out and strongly support and talk about the FairTax and get the facts across. You have to have both of those. And if you do, you're going to have a result similar to what we had here in Florida.
We here at FairTax Power Radio want you to send us examples of dishonest ads that are running in your area. We will take them apart piece by piece, and hopefully in your area you can get the same result there that we got here in Florida, that the FairTax supporter won big, the FairTax demagogue, his political career is down a few notches.
Yes, he was thinking he was going to be governor and then maybe president, and now he's looking for a job.
Yeah, a real job outside of politics.
Yeah, which is different than what he planned. But the nice thing about this is that when they make these totally spurious assertions about the FairTax, it's so easy to rebut. And one of the things that's true is if you show the great mass of people, this person lied about this, they're not going to trust him in other areas.
If you're willing to be that dishonest in the campaign, what happens afterwards?
Yes, and what else have you not told us that you should have, or have you told us that isn't the truth?
So I think we've seen the importance of being organized in the state level on the FairTax. You had the national group, but there are state level groups as well that folks can get involved with.
All around the country, yes. And if you will just get involved, you can send an email to info@fairtax.org. We'll put you in touch with people in your area. But get involved, and you don't have to spend thousands of hours or tens of hundreds of hours or whatever. All you have to do is look at some basic points about the FairTax, and you're going to be able to explain 90+% of any questions people have.
We're always telling people go to fairtax.org to get educated, go to bigsolution.org to get involved.
Yes, great way to say it.
That works pretty well.
Yeah, because and if you have a question and you don't know how to answer it, send a question to Bob and Ron.
TheFairTaxGuys@gmail.com, or you can send a Facebook video. And of course, we've got to give kudos to Randy Fisher, who is online with us, answering a lot of the comments that they come.
Right.
Sometimes they go by so fast we don't get to see them all while we're actually on the air, including the one from the lady that liked the Rubik's cubes.
Yeah.
I mean,
Speaking of Randy, Randy's on vacation. He's actually up in New England looking for artifacts for Calvin Coolidge. That's his favorite president. And he put this on Facebook the other day. This is a quote from Calvin Coolidge. "The wise and correct course to follow in taxation is not to destroy those that have already secured success, but to create conditions under which everyone will have a better chance to be successful." That's what we're doing with the FairTax.
That's right.
Gives everybody a break.
Yes.
Absolutely. I tell you, one of the things that really struck me was when this tax, I'm not going to call it reform, it was relief that we got last December.
The tax plan is what I call it.
Cut the corporate tax rate from 39 to 21, and we saw what happens.
Yes.
What happens if you cut that 21 down to 0?
It just goes crazy. And you know, the incredibly sad thing is, even though you've cut the tax rate to 21%, you're still dealing in an international trading area at a huge disadvantage, because all of our trading partners, except I think one small island, use a value-added tax, a consumption tax. And the fair tax is a retail sales tax, but economically it has the same impact because it's a tax on consumption. What you have done is, yes, you've lowered the tax rate on a corporate tax point of view, but you have not eliminated the taxes that are built into the prices.
You've treated a symptom, but you haven't fixed the problem.
Cause, yes.
Right.
And so you've got a situation where our importing trade partners who import things into this country, export to us, but we import them, are being able to get all of their value-added tax back. So the price may be reduced to 80% when it comes here. We don't tax a dime. We don't tax it. We only tax it if it's involved in a U.S. business and sold. Like if Walmart brings these products in at 80% of what they sell for in the country of origin, and Walmart sells them, well, Walmart has to pay an income tax on its profits. But it's only a very small percentage of what was imported. Does that make sense? So the imports are really not being taxed. Conversely, when we ship things overseas, we have to carry all of the corporate FICA taxes that have all been included all the way up the production chain.
All of the tax liability, all the compliance costs that are built into the system make our goods much more expensive on the world marketplace.
15, 20% more.
And if we could just play on a level playing field, what would that do to jobs in America, demand for American products?
It just would be, this is great, what's been happening. And I'm not going to say double it because that is hard to hit, I'm sure 8%. But you're talking about a substantial increase because honestly, and this was told to me back in the 90s, Bill Archer, who used to be chairman of the Ways and Means Committee, and I were on a panel together. And one of the panel members was a gentleman who used to advise a lot of Japanese huge companies. And when he was over there, he asked actually there were two of them in a meeting, he said, what would happen if the U.S. adopted the fair tax tomorrow? And they looked at him and said, well, we would move our national headquarters to the U.S. the day after tomorrow.
Yes.
Because that would make no sense to be anywhere else.
Yeah.
Because the other thing, Bob, and this is the part that I think is really not understood, but think about it a minute. You've got somewhere between 15 and 30 trillion dollars, which is offshore, which is largely hidden from their country. In other words, the Russian oligarchs who've hidden the money, the Chinese, the Koreans, probably U.S. people, Italians,
yeah.
you know. So it's not known to any country, not being taxed, but that money is looking for ways of investment. Now, if they came to the U.S. and we had a zero tax on capital, and they looked at Germany where they have a 30% tax,
Wonder where it's going.
what would be a big factor in determining where the money's going to go? We're going to talk about this huge, as my friend Billy Tozan used to say in the 90s, a huge vacuum sound of money flowing into the country. It'd just be because
I like the sound of that.
yeah, and then look at the number of jobs. Look at the fact that the way you get raises of money is typically through higher productivity. So if you have more money, if you've got a machine where a guy is making 10 widgets an hour, and you can buy a machine where you can make 50, you've just increased the productivity, and what happens is that you can look at charts that these economists, FedEx, and other people have it. As productivity goes up, wages go up with it. Okay? You've got, 78% of the people in this country living paycheck to paycheck. They need higher wages.
Absolutely.
What's the best way to get it? Is to increase productivity, bring jobs here, because the one example that I think is really important, it's a real-life example. I was up in Edmonton, Canada, a few years ago, and I was having dinner with some people, and they asked me, what does a McDonald's worker make in Florida? And I said, I don't know, but maybe $8, $9, $10 an hour. And they started laughing. They said, you'll never get anybody to even show up for an interview here at McDonald's for less than $15 or $18 an hour. And I said,
Wow.
why is that? Is that a minimum? No, it's not minimum wage. That's just what the demand is. Because in the oil fields up north of here, this one girl had a nephew who had gotten in trouble in high school with drugs, never finished high school, went to rehab, was driving a truck in the oil patch, she called it, making $85,000 to $100,000 a year.
Well,
all right, no skills other than he got himself cleaned up and he learned, knew how to drive a truck, and Ron knows how that is.
Yep.
And he's making this money. So why would somebody who had that ability to make that kind of money want to work at McDonald's
For $10 an hour, you can't do
so,
that.
So they were making
So they
$22 an hour. But she says the important thing is that they're pulling people in that they have to train because they don't have any choice. That's the only people they can get. So they have to train them because many of them don't know how to use the cash register, and they have to set up a class to train them.
Oh, wow.
And they have to train them to do different things because the education hasn't been tremendous. But they're willing to do that because they have to.
I see.
Not because the government told them to.
Yeah.
But because competition for jobs forced them to do it. So look at America and think about what would happen if we had all this money coming in, all of this demand. We'd be begging for immigrants because we couldn't keep up with it. But we could have a sane immigration policy, and we could bring people in that benefited the country, that didn't just have to be subsidized.
We're seeing a little bit of that now, the competition for employees, aren't we? I make the case that what they've done in Washington between President Trump, before the tax plan passed, he was reducing regulations.
Yes.
All right. And, of course, that's what the FairTax will do. It'll take a lot of the compliance costs away from the company so they can spend more time running their company.
Right.
And then you reduce the tax rate for the companies, and you can see what's happened to the economy. You can't drive anywhere around here, Gainesville, Ocala, Clearwater, without seeing something either being built or being refurbished.
Right. Amen. Well, we are slap out of time. Look at your timer over there.
Oh, yeah.
Steve, I thank you so much for being with us here on FairTax Power Radio.
My pleasure.
Hope you can come back at a future date.
Thank you. I look forward to it.
Until we meet again, I'm Bob Paxton.
And I'm Ron Molero.
Reminding you the FairTax is America's big solution, and once you understand it all together now, you'll demand it.
These income tax forms are way too complicated. There's got to be a better way. Who are you?
We're the FairTax guys.
We've got a big solution for you.
What's that?
It's the FairTax. Completely eliminates the federal income tax system as we know it. No more withholding, no more payroll taxes, no more tax returns ever, no more IRS. All gone. And I guarantee you, once you understand it,
You'll demand it.
Yeah.